into an office.
All right, y'all, we're going to go ahead and get started. And we have a little virtual online version going, so you may see me like talking to this computer right here, just to make sure the audio is okay. But really excited to bring this information to you today. And let's just take a moment, because this is really, I feel like this is powerful, useful info. I put a lot of time into it. Let's take a moment and just become completely present by taking a few breaths, almost like meditating, so that we can just take in this really, really powerful and useful information. So all I want us to do is you can keep your eyes open or you can close them. It doesn't matter. We're just going to take 3 deep breaths at our own pace. You're going to take a deep breath in, and then on the exhale, because there's some relative silence, we're just going to listen to what's going on in the room. At the bottom of that exhale, just feel the body, and do that 2 more times. All right, so do that at your own pace. 3 deep breaths. All right, cool. So that, I love that silence in space. It's so beautiful. All right, hold on. I had an intro that I had kind of rehearsed here for a second. Well, anyway, like I'm like a lot of you. So for most of my life, I've been trying to figure out health and nutrition. For the majority of my life, I did what was wrong, thinking it was right, until I had my first diagnosis. Like I had high blood pressure, pre-diabetic. I was very overweight, and it was very disillusioning. Heartbreaking. I put so much time into everything, weird. So that kind of started me on the path that I'm on today, which is really just a path of self-education and discovery. I started vegan. My real food journey started with being vegan, a hardcore vegan for 2 years. I still have the emails that I sent out to my family about all kinds of different things, how to combine grains and legumes to get certain amino acid profiles. And then at some point in the last 6 months, I lost a lot of muscle mass. I developed some digestive issues. And then I found what I would consider to be ancestral health. This is what we teach in the SHT, and evolutionary way of things combined with science, But my point there is that I understand, sympathize, and empathize with the vegan and plant-based movement completely. And the information that I'm presenting today, this is not meant to be an argument for or against anything. Like, I'm not here to say, to make an argument for omnivore. I'm not here to make an argument for vegan. What I'm here to do today is share with you what I believe to be the best, most useful information and insights if you want to go vegan or plant-based or something along those lines. Because there's just a lot of things that I've learned over the years. I've had people that I've worked with that have transitioned from vegan to omnivore. I've had people that I've worked with that have transitioned from vegan to vegetarian, whatever that, it's a very flexible term, as we know. And I've also had vegans that refuse to eat animal foods, but they still want to work with me. So we've had to come up with some smart guidelines, and those have evolved over the years. So anytime that I say anything in here, first of all, it's from a place of love, compassion, support, with an intention to help and heal. And then also, it's not meant to be argumentative at all. So if I say something like, there's no plant-based sources of B12. That's just based on my knowledge and what I understand from the scientific literature. I'm not saying that maybe there is another way that I don't know about, but I feel pretty well versed in this kind of stuff. So what I do want is that if you do go vegan or plant-based or something along those lines, that you do it the best way possible, because we all have similar goals. We want to look and perform our best and have good health over a lifetime. Okay. So I have some pretty badass handouts here. Again, these are evolving as time goes on too. Chandler, these are updated. And then if you can just stay with me in the handouts, and then anyone attending virtually, these will be available as a PDF. I'll make sure that you have these. Now, if you have any questions along the lines of anything that I just talked about, like, I'm more than happy to sit here and discuss some things with you. But I feel like going through this info is going to help generate some discussion anyway. Okay. So the first thing I just want to clarify, because we do have some people that are SHT, omnivore, almost heavily carnivore, and the question always comes up, like, can I be vegan, vegetarian, and still be SHT? And I would say that the short answer is yes, especially if you're vegetarian, allowing a little bit of fat-based nutrients from animal sources like some butter, cheese, and then even eggs and fish and chicken and things like that. Hardcore vegan, it's very difficult, but if you implement the stuff that we talk about today, I think you're going to do really, really well. Okay. There is potential for nutritional deficiencies over time and some toxicities that come from some plant foods. Okay, you just have to be aware of that, and very, I would say, consciously participating in your eating process so that you can figure out what things you do best on, which is kind of what we advocate anyway in the general SHT. I also recommend that you have reasonable expectations, because what we preach in the SHT is a nutrient-based way of eating, and we also advocate training the body how to be metabolically flexible and use fat for fuel. And so if you modify our recommendations, I'm not sure how far down optimal you can get. That doesn't mean that you can't be optimal as far as plant-based goes, but the reason that we have our guidelines to get together is because we want optimal health for everyone that we work with, longevity and quality of life and all that kind of stuff, right? Having reasonable expectations as far as if you're omnivore transitioning over to plant-based or vegan, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, some people respond well to it, some people have a really hard time with it. Sometimes it's an adjustment thing. If you're transitioning from standard American diet, which I don't think any of us in here are, right? But if you're transitioning from processed food to plant-based or vegan, then I would expect you're going to see some tremendous transformation, like some great shifts, right? And then, like we said before, because you have to compensate with plant-based nutrients and proteins and things like that, you just really need to be aware of how your body responds to certain foods, because there's a lot of potential for digestive issues and skin issues and flare-ups of autoimmune conditions. And so that's where self-testing really comes into play, all right? And that's a whole other discussion in and of itself. We usually do a talk on that every year. So, all right. So I think it would be useful to go through, I think, what's the next page here? Oh, yes, this is very important. So having an open mind is crucial. So I would say that a conscientious omnivore, carnivore, or vegan are all going to share similar things in common as far as intentions. Okay, and that means we all value the importance of quality of food. We all value humane treatment of life, including plants. Like, how the hell do we know that plants don't have feelings and don't experience pain? You know, like, I could go off on that for a really long time, right? So we value the humane treatment of life in general. And in fact, I think you're a sad human being if you don't. You know, we care about the planet and the environment, and we all want to be as healthy and happy as we can possibly be. So if you're considering being vegan or plant-based or whatever version of that you want to, you have to ask yourself the question, like, why am I choosing this way of life? If it's nutritional based, there is not an argument for it. I'm sorry, I wish there was. I was in that world for a very long time, and there's not. There's not a nutritional argument for it, and we can talk at length about that, okay? And I'm saying that with a lot of love and compassion. If your primary reason is for health and you have an open mind, I have so many great resources that you can learn from. And if you're very adamant on being vegan, then if you follow these guidelines listed in here and you just talk to me about it, like, you can see some really good results. If your primary reason is ethical and moral, I empathize with that because I was there. You know, when you make good food quality decisions and you consciously participate in the eating process, then you are improving quality of life for all sentient beings on this planet, including plants, if you want to call plants sentient beings, right? And then if your primary reason is environmental, then you really need to educate yourself on all sides, because I can tell you right now, I have read over 10 books on sustainability, and nobody knows what the heck they're talking about, right? You can make arguments for anything that you want. Cow farts are contributing to global warming, like, seriously? They're not. But anybody can skew any argument any way they want in that world. There's some really good recent books that have come out that are really, really powerful. And the bottom line is, this world evolved with a balance of life. All right, there's a cycle of life. Life feeds on life, and that it's just the way it is, right? Something has to die for something to live, and vice versa. We need animals, we need plants, we need everything, because if you take anything away, then you're going to disrupt the entire equilibrium, right? And anybody ever seen that George Carlin video where he said the Earth's going to be fine? Right? You remember that? The Earth's going to be fine. We can do whatever we want, and the Earth is we'll kill ourselves and die off, and it's going to come back and rebuild itself, and, like, we're going to mess ourselves up if we're not careful. All right, so that's about everything that I want to say there as a little introduction. Any comments or questions? Yeah. All right, cool. Feel free to speak up if you do. So let's talk about a few crucial concepts. If you're a veteran SHT, these things are going to sound familiar, but I think it's useful before we get into the things that we recommend doing to be a smart vegan. When we eat real food, our focus is, well, first of all, what is the purpose of eating real food? Why are we eating food?
To feel good.
That's what we're hoping to get as results. So Holly said to feel good and healthy. That's awesome, yes. But what does food do for us? What is the point? Fuel.
Yeah.
Fuel is part of it. Okay. What else? Sustains life. Yes, I like that. Yeah. So think about what this body is. Like this body it's food. It's the food we eat. Because you're not creating this body from air, and you're not creating this body from the water you drink. Where does it come from? I hope we all understand the body's constantly dying and replenishing itself. Cells are constantly being sloughed off and excreted, and then we constantly have to rebuild the system. And it's estimated the digestive system replaces itself once every 7 days or something like that. The entire body maybe once every 7 to 9 years, I think. So the bottom line is this body is food. That's it, right? So we are eating for nutrients to give the body what it needs to build the body and also contribute to all the different functions that happen inside the body. Digestive processes, our ability to think, our emotions are nutrient dependent, because where does things like serotonin come from? They don't come out of thin air, they have nutrient precursors, right? So the purpose of eating food is this, and everything that happens in this. And then we also, Chris mentioned energy, we do get some energy from food. So our other focus with food is we're trying to get the body to learn how to be metabolically flexible and burn fat for fuel, because we all already know how to use sugar for fuel. Okay, so that's our two main focuses. Now, we had a really cool class that we did earlier this year, and we put some concepts together to help us understand how to assess foods. The way that we assess foods, we call this nutritional vitality, right? So we assess, like, how do I determine what is the best food to eat? So when I look at a food, I want to make sure that food has nutrients that are worth the body using, that the body can use. I want to make sure that it has minimal toxicity. And then I also want to make sure that, or make sure I understand how it contributes to metabolic efficiency and flexibility, meaning how does this food contribute to my goal of training the body how to use fat for fuel? Because again, it already knows how to use sugar. All right? That's kind of how we assess foods. Now we have some really good talks where we talked about ancestral wisdom, evolutionary biology, anthropology, what our ancestors ate and all that kind of stuff. We also talk about the human digestive system and what it's designed to eat. In a nutshell, this digestive system has evolved to assimilate nutrients and it's almost like it's a hybrid vehicle that can do a lot of different things, right? We can survive on a lot of different foods, right? We're not herbivores. Can we all agree that we're not herbivores? Anybody have an argument against that or concerned about that? You know what an herbivore is? A grass eater, an herb eater. Like we can't sustain ourselves on just herbs, on just grass, okay? And we're also, some people would say we're carnivores. I would say that we're in the middle. We have a very flexible digestive system. I had something else I wanted to say with that. Anyway, so our digestive system is geared for, I call it direct nutrients and nutrient assimilation. Okay, so if you go to the doctor and your doctor says you're low in magnesium, what's your doctor tell you?
Take bananas.
Maybe. Most doctors would say take some magnesium. Or if you're low in vitamin D, what does he tell you to do? Or take a D3 supplement, right? Right? Well, but that's also what I'm trying to say, is you want to eat the things that contain the things that you need, okay? Or take the things that contain. So your doctor doesn't say eat grass to get short-chain fatty acids. Your doctor says if you're low in magnesium, take magnesium. If you're low in vitamin A, take vitamin A. If you're low in D3, take D3, or eat the foods that contain those things. That's exactly what I'm trying to say here. We do really well, as this digestive system does really well on direct nutrient to nutrient assimilation, meaning if I want whatever it is, I need to eat that thing. I can't depend on conversion very well, okay? Although there are some conversions that we can make, and I'll talk a little bit about it a little bit later, okay? So understanding what the body is made of, proteins, amino acids, fatty acids, connective tissue, these are the things that the body needs to build itself, or foods that contain these things, okay? So we just need to understand, to be optimal, we need to consume the things that contribute to what the body actually is, all right? The body is definitely not made of some things, okay? Which means that this can help us make decisions in the moment, right? So if I'm considering having my favorite little donut or pastry or whatever our weakness is, it's like you can think, is this helping to build my body, or is it probably moving it in a negative direction, anti-building the body, right? This is where disease comes from and dysfunction comes from, nutritional deficiencies and toxicity built up over time. So if I eat things that do not resemble my body, what does it do to my body? It damages my body, and then I have to excrete it, okay? So, I don't know, I hope, my vision is that sometimes when we say things like this, it's like if I'm sitting here looking at this bag of Cheetos that I absolutely love, maybe I won't because I know that this is not contributing to what I'm trying to accomplish, okay? So this is how we come up with our definition of real food. And if you don't have this, like most of us here have our guides and stuff, so Holly and Ben, if you don't have those, then I can give those to you. I have some guides in the office. We'll give those free to everybody in here. If you're trying to go plant-based, you can basically take this definition of food and cross out the animal-based foods on it, all right? You'll do really well with it. But this is a nutrient-based way of eating, okay? We have this big plate that's the majority of our main meals, and then we have these smaller plates, which are carbohydrates and dairy-based, depending on how you do with those different foods. But you would just kind of modify this based on what it is that you're trying to do, okay? Now, can anybody who has not worked with me recently tell me what is the purpose of body fat? Because I know that you could probably give a class in this, Diane, right now. What is the purpose of stored body fat?
For energy, if you run into an apocalypse or something.
There you go. That's my kind of terminology. So Holly said for energy if you run into the apocalypse. So that's what body fat is for. Okay, there's some other supportive functions of body fat like cushioning organs and things like that. It's not for warmth. All right, it is an evolutionary adaptation to starvation. So body fat is there as stored energy for when we're not eating. All right, it's stored energy for when we're not eating. So what is one thing that I can do to get my body to learn how to use fat for fuel?
Stop eating.
Not eat, yes. If it's stored energy for not eating, then one thing I can do is not eat. I'm not talking about developing an eating disorder. What I'm talking about is just allowing periods of not eating, meaning we don't want to graze all day. We want to have a meal and then give us some space and have a meal and give us some space. And yes, experimenting with fasting protocols is extremely powerful. And yes, I'm very aware of eating disorders and all this. That's up here. What we're talking about is what's physiologically beneficial. Okay. So another concept: where do we get energy from? Where does the body create energy from? Maybe think about like dietary sources. Where does the body get energy?
Sugar.
Sugar, okay. And sugar gets broken down into glucose, okay. So we can think sugar or glucose, all right. So that is what we would consider carbohydrates, okay. So in our world, carbohydrates, we don't think that broccoli and cauliflower are carbs, although some people would call them carbs because they have very little glucose. To us, carbs are dominant sources of starch and sugar because starch gets broken down into glucose, sugar gets broken down into glucose. Are there any other places the body can get energy from? Yes, all right, fat. So the body can also get energy from fat. That means dietary fat and, as we just talked about, body fat, okay? So anything else that we can get energy from? What's some other sources? So protein, okay? So we can break down protein. But protein gets broken down through gluconeogenesis into glucose. So now we're back to carbs. What else? Is there anything else? What about, Diane? What about the keto movement? Ketones. So where do ketones come from? From fat. So now we're back to fat, right? So it's like it's either fat or carbs, okay? Now, something very important to understand is that carbohydrates are the opposite of fat. So if our goal is to train the body how to use fat for fuel, we just have to understand that carbs are the opposite of fat for fuel, which means that we're not saying don't ever eat carbs. We're saying that you need to be aware that every time you have carbs, you are not using the body fat. You are not training the body how to use fat because carbs are the opposite. If I eat a meal that has starch and or sugar in it and some protein and fat, the body's going to use the carbs first because they're very easy. They're like kindling on a fire, right? Fat's a little bit difficult to access, relative, right? So carbs are the opposite of fat for fuel. That doesn't mean don't eat carbs. It means we need some rules with carbs, okay? Any questions on that? It might be your question. Yeah.
So if our ancestors were primarily predators, they were living off of mostly meat, you would say raw food meat.
I think they were survivalists, so it depended on what was available for sure.
Well, I guess the question is, why would we evolve as humans to process carbs faster as opposed to processing fats?
I don't know. That's a really good question, but I think it all comes back to this adaptive system to use anything that's available. So I don't know. That's an interesting way to phrase that question. I bet you I can come up with or research this a little bit. I think it's just what are the things available on this planet to consume, and then our body has developed an ability to use those different things, but it has a preference for different things. Or maybe there's a health preference for different things, which is based on how we evolved, the things we had access to. I don't know. That's an interesting way to ask it. All right. So again, stored body fat is energy for when we're not eating. So we have what we call our ideal day's meals. Again, this is in our guide as well. Just a few basic rules. We don't start the day with carbohydrates. If you have a sunburn, what's the first thing that you're supposed to do?
Get out of the sun.
Before that, get out of the sun. Okay?
I get sunburn a lot.
Holly, you probably don't want to put sun lotion while you're standing in the sun.
No.
Yeah. Okay. So you want to get out of the sun. If I have a sugar problem or a carb problem, the first thing I want to do is just have some kind of rules around it, right? So we don't start the day with sugar. That's it. Because I'm trying to do something else. I'm trying to train the body how to use fat for fuel. So if we starve the body of carbohydrates the first part of the day, then the body starts to learn how to use this other fuel source that we get when we eat other things. Okay. Our second rule is we don't snack in between meals. And why do we say that?
Because body's got to work off that fat.
You're trying to get the body to use body fat for fuel. Body fat is stored energy for when we're not eating. So I need some space. So what we want is a nutrient-dense meal, some space. Nutrient-dense meal, some space. And that's very bio-individual. Some people do good on 2 meals a day, some people 3, some people 1. Some of us fast once a week and do 2 or 3 days of no eating at all. That's perfectly fine. But we want space in between meals. Okay? We definitely don't want to be eating every 2 or 3 hours. And then our final rule is when you have carbs, if you have carbs, have them later in the day from real food sources in moderated amounts. All right. So again, very familiar to some of us, and some of us probably new information. Okay. So any questions on that? Go ahead, Diane.
If you do snack, if you snack on avocado, is that a bad thing?
Well, so the question is, if you do snack and you snack on avocado, is that a bad thing? I think the biggest win that we're looking for is real food, right? So if you do snack and you snack on even an apple, it's better than a Snickers bar. You know what I mean? Like the first priority is real food, period. No matter how much or how often, no matter when. Okay? If you have an apple in the morning, a bowl of fruit, and you do this completely opposite of what we're saying here, if you're eating real food, that's a big win. So it's not a bad thing. I think if you have to snack, then eating something that's a little bit more protein and fat based is going to be reinforcing to this idea of training the body how to use fat for fuel versus snacking on sugar and fruits and stuff like that, right? But the first step is we want to just eat real food, right? Yes, Sharon.
Why do we want carbs later in the day again?
Well, if you have
If you
them,
want.
because we want this, it's like you have a fat-burning, low-carb training effect for the majority of the day. And then if you have carbs, you have a little bit of an evening. And we usually say up to about 3/4 of a cup or half a cup of starch and half a cup of fruit. And if you do that in small amounts, it's still relatively low carb, but you're getting the benefits, the sanity of having carbs. You're getting some of the nutritional benefits of the foods that contain the carbs. So there's some good things that come from having carbs. There's supportive roles of glucose inside the body. So we don't think low carb is beneficial long term, although it can be a useful short-term tool. But carbs are healthy. Carbs give us sanity. I don't like to go without my fruit. I love my fruit and my honey and chocolate and stuff like that. Cool. And then Holly, what were you going to ask? You were gonna say
The same question about the snacking,
okay, cool.
because I'm a snacker.
Yeah. So that for some of us, that's a big first step. Just like trying to choose. All right, I'm doing 3 meals a day, no snack. 2 meals a day, no snack. And then maybe the carbs first part of the day is a big step for a lot of us. A lot of people go through some transitional difficulties with that. All right, cool. So that's kind of setting up what we're going to talk here. So again, we eat for nutrients, and then we eat in a way that trains the body how to be metabolically flexible. I'm sorry, I couldn't help but use Colby's picture because I think it's a good representation of what makes body. All right, cool. Big picture. All we're trying to do is eat real food according to whatever definition we believe in. We're trying to be strategic with carbohydrates because Honestly, that's the problem for most people. It's the carb part of it. Whether it's standard American diet or real foodies, carbs are the problem for most people. You cannot, in my opinion, you cannot overeat meats and fats and vegetables because your body tells you otherwise, all right? What's problematic is when you eat a lot of that and you throw on a lot of carbs, okay? So carbs is where we have to have the rules. And then we want periods of not eating. That's evolutionary helpful, okay? All right, any questions, comments?
But isn't vegan all carbs?
No, it's a lot of plants and some healthy fats. There's some plant-based fats. We'll talk about those.
Plants aren't carbs.
Well, remember we said our definition of carb is dominant starch and sugar. Okay, so you can think carbs to us is just starch and sugar. Okay, good question. It's good to reinforce it. All right, now, what are the best sources of nutrients? Again, if we look at our little concept on nutritional vitality, we assess foods based on nutrients, toxicity, and how it contributes to metabolic flexibility. Let's consider what are the different things that we can eat. What are the different things?
As a vegan.
No, just in general. Like, what are the different things? My questions. I know, like, I have specific answers for them, and it's like, but it's just interesting to get like people's feedback. What are the things that we can eat? Okay, so I would say plants, bacon. Let's say real food. Okay, then we have processed food. Then we have what I would consider to be health engineered food. You know, like protein powders and shakes and bars and all that kind of stuff. And then we have supplements. This pretty much covers everything that we could possibly consume, okay? I'm not going to consume metal. I'm not going to consume wood. I don't think. There's probably some people out there that grind up wood and say it's good to put in a kale shake or something like that. But I mean, seriously, like it's like, I bet you if I Googled it, there's probably some people doing it. But in general, it's either like what we would consider real food, whatever your definition is, processed food, engineered health food, supplements, okay? Now, out of all this stuff, what's the best thing to consume?
Real food.
Do we really believe in that? Do most of us believe in that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, yeah, because it definitely is, okay? And then you can throw on some really good high-quality supplements and some good quality, we call it SHT-approved foods, you know, the things made with good ingredients, you know, those are perfectly fine.
They name supplements for a reason.
That's right. There's supplements they're supposed to be supportive to a real food way of eating. That's right. All right. So to us, real food gives us, and again, regardless of what you believe in real food, vegan, plant-based, you know, omnivore, carnivore, nutrients, nutrient synergy. So that means that when I consume real food, I'm not getting one nutrient. I'm getting a bunch of stuff together that my body understands in a way that I'm never going to understand conceptually. Right. It's just like they interact in a way that the body really understands really well. And we get food synergy, so when we eat different foods, same thing. It's very different because the body understands how to utilize all those things together versus one isolated food. And we get minimal toxins compared to processed food, toxic food. And then we also, I believe, we inherit a vitality and a life force from fresh living food, even if you cook it, because there's just something perishable and living about it. All right, so yes, real food is the way. Something to understand is we want to minimize toxins to the best of our abilities. Why are toxins problematic? Does anybody know?
Cause inflammation in your body.
They can contribute to inflammation. They can contribute to a lot of different problems.
What are we considering toxins?
Well, that is a good question. So I think we're going to cover what the main sources of toxins are in the American diet. But I would say anything that is not usable by the body and or damages the body. Okay, so toxins, or more specifically toxicants, damage cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems. They inhibit the assimilation of nutrients, and they have to be excreted from the body through the detox process, which also is nutrient dependent. So just think toxins are the opposite of nutrients, and toxins in the presence of nutrients can negate nutrients too. Okay? And then the question is, what are the things that are toxic to the human body? Main toxins in the American diet, we say refined cereal grains and industrial seed oils. And when I say industrial seed oils, we'll go through some specific examples, but highly processed seed oils, excess sugar, processed soy, things that we'd probably consider toxins like pesticides and herbicides, heavy metals, industrial pollutants, chemicals, preservatives, and dyes, and things like that. Main sources of toxins. So we have what we consider to be our foods to avoid. And we recommend, just in a really quick summary, excess sugar, artificial sweeteners like Sweet and Low and Splenda and things like that, refined and processed foods in general, although there are some processed approved foods made with good ingredients that you can consume. Even in the vegan world that we teach, we recommend staying away from most grains because grains tend to be really problematic for most people. And then the toxic fats and industrial seed oils, we're going to cover those specifically because those are the most insidious things out there. If you're doing dairy, low quality dairy, and then GMOs. But to highlight the processed fats and oils, this is extremely crucial, especially if you're going plant-based or vegan. You have to avoid hydrogenated, partially hydrogenated, margarine, Crisco, and then the fake butters and spreads, like I can't believe it's not butter, and Benecol, because they're made with these fats that we're trying to avoid. And then the highly processed seed oils like canola, corn, soybean, vegetable, grapeseed, safflower, and rice bran. We usually say avoid sunflower oil unless it's high oleic or high stearic, which means that it's very high in monounsaturated fats and it's very protective. Okay? So these are things that we definitely want to pay attention to and opt for the more traditional fats, even if we're doing vegan or plant-based. Okay?
Do you consider alcohol a toxin?
Oh yeah, for sure. There's absolutely no purpose. I mean, you can break it down and use a little bit of it for energy, but definitely ethanol is a toxin. What was something I was just thinking? Fructose, like there's the lustig community that thinks fructose is a toxin. They handle it the same way as alcohol, but fructose does get broken down into glucose and some other usable things. Ethanol is just toxic. Unfortunately, I love to drink. All right, so bioavailability of nutrients is a very important thing to understand. In a lot of plants, minerals are bound up by phytic acid. Okay, this is a protective mechanism by plants. Plants want to hold on to nutrients because they can't run from danger. And so, and especially if it's pertaining to seeds, because the seeds want those nutrients when the seed starts to grow. So phytic acid kind of binds to a lot of minerals. We just need to be aware of it. Sometimes minerals aren't easily absorbed from a plant-based food. And then there's differences in some nutrients. So vitamin A, we don't find in plants, although we do find beta-carotene. Beta-carotene can be converted into vitamin A, but most humans don't do that conversion very efficiently. And some do, and it's hard to tell who does and who doesn't, I guess, without some kind of testing. We believe that there's a difference between a lot of the plant-based irons, the non-hem iron, hem irons, and then also the animal-based hem iron. So we think it's much more absorbable. D3 we don't find in plants. D2 we do find in plants. Some humans can make that conversion. Some of us can make D3 through our skin, through getting a lot of sun exposure. Some of us don't get sun exposure. And then K2, typically found only in animal foods, and a very important nutrient, although you can get it from fermenting some produce and some vegetables. So these are some things, obviously, that we're going to want to be aware of as far as supplementation goes. All right. So let's go now. I just want to have a discussion around my handouts here, and if you have any questions as we go through this, just let me know. So if we go to the page numbers at the bottom right, if we go to page 3, we've already talked about the things at the top 2 here. I want to talk about the synergy at the bottom, the synergy of some fat-soluble nutrients. Vitamins A, D, and K2 are extremely important for health and vitality. If you went through the SHT or worked with me privately, you remember Dr. Weston A. Price, the dentist that traveled the world, and he found that these fat-soluble nutrients were the main things lacking in the American diet and one of the main contributors to what he called physical degeneration of the human population, right? So they're just very, very important nutrients to be aware of. And so we want to place an emphasis on trying to get these or supplement with these to the best of our abilities. If we go to the next page, vitamin B12, most vegans, vegetarians are deficient in B12, so definitely something that we can supplement with. And there are some very, very accurate tests out there. And I can't remember what the heck the name of the newest one is, but it's much more reputable than some of the others. And there's a lot of different versions of B12 supplementation. And there's some that we know to be very, very absorbable, okay? I'm gonna make a plug for a lot of the supplements that I sell in my office. And it's not because I sell them, it's because the company that I use, Biotics, is one of the best quality companies I've ever experienced in my life. I could talk about them for days. I've toured their facility. And their quality control measures and efficacy are just through the roof. You're not going to find it on Whole Foods shelf stores because they only work through practitioners, and I love it. So anytime I can offer a supplement through Biotics, I do. But a lot of times I just tell you to get it on Amazon or something else, like D3 or something like that. So B12, something very important to supplement. And if you're not sure, you can always get tested. I can share the test with you. Calcium. The bioavailability of calcium in plant foods is not the same as in animal foods. So again, it's just something to be aware of. That's not a knock on plant foods. It's just basically saying maybe you'd benefit from some supplementing with some calcium. And again, your blood work sometimes gives you nutritional values as far as that goes. Iron, we just talked about the difference in absorbability and bioavailability of iron. Zinc is also something that we see a lot of vegetarians and vegans deficient in. And again, a lot of these are mineral-based because minerals are bound up by phytic acid, and that's one of the main reasons that we don't get a lot of that stuff in plant foods. EPA and DHA are the long-form chains of omega-3 fatty acids, and crucial for what is known as the prostaglandin pathways for anti-inflammation. Okay, so we can create EPA and DHA out of linoleic acid, but again, this requires conversion, and a lot of humans don't do that well. Some do really awesome with it. So that would be something that I would recommend supplementing with, and I'll talk a little bit about some specific recommendations a little bit later. It helps if you're trying to go plant-based or vegetarian. If you're just a little bit flexible with some things and you're willing to take like an EPA, DHA, fish-based supplement, that could be a huge, huge win. Or some of these fat-soluble nutrients, that would be a huge win. Right? Fat-soluble nutrients, vitamin A and D, like absolutely crucial. And like we said before, plants don't really contain vitamin A. They contain beta-carotene, which can be converted to vitamin A. And the version of D that most of us are looking for is D3, which we can create internally, but also most of us would probably benefit from supplementing with if we don't get a lot of sun. Right? What else? If you're willing to do, as a vegetarian, if you're willing to do dairy products, fish, maybe a little bit of chicken and eggs, then I think you would be perfectly fine, being aware that a lot of these nutrients are going to be very bioavailable in those foods. All right, so let's go on to the next page. Protein and fat-soluble nutrients. All right, so if you're a flexible vegetarian, then I would recommend including in your diet. And the reason we list these here is because if you're thinking about, ethical, moral, like for some reason, like a lot of us may have problems with consuming animals like chickens or cows and pigs and things like that. Eggs may be something that you incorporate. Fish, ideally entire fish like mackerel and sardines and things like that. If you're eating chicken, we recommend eating the entire bird because there's a lot of beneficial nutrients in the skin. Bone stock is extremely beneficial. Maybe some people, I've had some plant-based clients that were totally flexible and do bone stock but wouldn't eat animal flesh, right? That would be a huge win. Butter, all right? You're not really necessarily eating an animal. It's an animal-based product. Butter is going to be a powerhouse in fat-soluble nutrients like vitamin A and vitamin D, some conjugated linoleic acid, and then butter also has really easy-to-use fat-based energy, medium-chain triglycerides. Same thing with cheeses, if you tolerate them. And then protein powders, I'm usually not a big fan of, but if you're going plant-based or vegetarian, vegan, and you have a hard time getting enough protein, then I think some protein is perfectly fine. Whey protein, I think, would be superior, but if you're trying to move away from animal-based stuff, then I have below that my list of plant-based proteins in order of priority. Chandler's very experienced, and he can probably give you his opinion on how he's reacted to a lot of different things. So legumes are going to be a great source of protein. If you do legumes, and by legumes we mean beans and things, beans and lentils, you have to do it yourself. You got to buy dry beans, soak them overnight. Ideally, you have a little bit of an acidic medium in there. You add some apple cider vinegar or something to kind of initiate like a fermentation process, and then you would cook those beans to your desired softness. But that soaking process is crucial, and when you buy canned beans, you're probably not getting a soaking process in those canned beans. They're usually just boiling them right off the bat. And that's why I'm not a big fan of bean-based like pastas and things, because they just take dried beans and grind them up. So legumes and beans are going to be a really great source of protein. And by the way, I just realized like sometimes we would advocate doing a plant-based experiment for a little bit. So if you're doing a true 100% plant-based experiment, beans would be a really good place to get some protein. Roasted hard-shelled nuts, so macadamia nuts, almonds, walnuts, and things like that I think would be awesome. I think roasting is crucial because roasting is going to break down a lot of that phytic acid and some of the other anti-nutrients. Ideally with nuts, what you're going to do is soak them and then dehydrate them and then roast them. But if you just get roasted nuts, I think that's a big win. Or if you buy raw nuts, you can roast them yourself. Okay? Another great source of protein. Protein powders. I think pea protein is probably going to be one of the best protein powders. Is that what you think? The majority of people? Okay, cool. Yeah. And then heard great things about rice protein powder, hemp protein powder. And then fermented soy. Traditional populations, if they consume soy, it was usually fermented like natto or tempeh. Fermentation is going to reduce the anti-nutrients and start to break it down and convert that into something more usable by the body. It's like pre-digestion, because really when you think about it, you've got organisms that are eating it and turning it into something else, so it's kind of digesting for us. And then as a last resort, edamame and then soy products, okay? But if you start at the top, make the majority of the stuff you consume legumes, beans, roasted hard-shelled nuts, maybe some really good quality protein pea powder. I think that would be awesome for your protein requirements if you're 100% plant-based. Supplementing with fat-soluble nutrients, I think, would be important and beneficial. If you're flexible to get that from some fish, like some cod liver oil, that would be a huge win. Cod liver oil, by the way, is going to have not just EPA and DHA, but it's also going to have vitamin A and vitamin D in balanced amounts. So these are really, really important nutrients. I also have a really good ADK supplement that's a blend of fat-soluble nutrients. And then you can also supplement with an algal oil. And research is kind of like skimpy on it, but the things that we see right now is that it's actually pretty legit. So algal oil would be 100% plant-based source of DHA. Have you done any of that yet? Okay, cool.
What is algal?
From algae. Yep. All right, any questions so far? This is meant to be open discussion if you got anything. Now we're just kind of going through the details.
About flaxseed oil? Where does that fit in here?
Okay, cool. So do you know why we would take flaxseed? Why is that a recommendation?
Because my last gym told me to take it.
That's it. So EPA and DHA are the end result of what we're looking for, okay? Linoleic acid can be converted into EPA and DHA. And linoleic acid we can get from some nuts and seeds, and flax oil is a really good source of linoleic acid. So the purpose that most people don't know of why they're taking flaxseed oil, the big purpose is to get EPA and DHA. And but like I said before, most people don't make that conversion very well. I think it's estimated 3 to 11% gets converted. And so and everybody's, you'll see some vegan superstars that do really well on just freaking plant-based foods, and maybe there's some of those really high performers or high converters, but it's hard to tell unless you get tested. So, but that would be the reason for flax oil. So I think it would be useful to have in a vegan protocol for sure, because then there's the possibility of getting EPA and DHA from it. Yep. Cool. What else? All right, we'll go on to the next page. So, if you have any questions on virtual, then just type them in the question box. There's a little ask a question button, and then we'll address those at the end, okay? All right, so other tips and considerations. So we just talked about, like our general SHT protocols, and I think those apply no matter what you're eating, plant-based, vegan, carnivore, omnivore, whatever. Our ultimate goal is to get the most nutrients possible, to minimize toxins, and to maximize metabolic flexibility. So I think if I were doing vegan again, and I have over the years, I'm not doing it this year, but every year up to this point, I've done like a 2-week stint or something like that. I would eat 100% fresh real fruit to the best of my abilities, right? Because that's where all the vitality, life force, and good nutrients are, minimal toxins, right? I would focus on nutrient density, okay? So I would focus on the proteins and the vegetables, and I would minimize the carbohydrates, because you're gonna probably get a lot more carbs on the plant-based vegan way of doing things in general anyway. And then I would eat for minimal toxins. So in the plant world, we just need to be aware of things. We mentioned before the highly processed seed oils. Absolutely avoid those things at all costs, although they are considered plant-based or vegan. So we're just reiterating a lot of the fat things here. When you do seeds and things, we would recommend avoiding grains, because grains tend to be the most problematic of all the different seeds for human beings. If you're going to do legumes, you need to soak them overnight and make them yourself. And then hard-shelled nuts and things like that. Some of this is reiteration. This is just me just like going through it in my mind and trying to talk about it, so I'll probably refine it over time. All right. Next page. Now we're just kind of digging into each one of those. Eating for metabolic flexibility. We've already talked about being strategic with carbohydrates. Okay. This is just reiterating our rule. The traditional fats that I would opt for on a plant-based or vegan diet would be extra virgin olive oil, red palm oil. I know there's a habitat concern for orangutans. If you source it, there's a really good company called Tropical Traditions which sources it from some really good quality places and that has no impact on orangutan habitats. So palm oil is great. Or if you see a food product that roasts the food in palm oil or palm olein, then that would be perfectly appropriate. Coconut oil, ideally cold pressed and virgin. High oleic or high stearic sunflower oil. And then if you're allowing yourself to be a little bit flexible, I think butter would be a huge win. Or if you have some dairy intolerances, ghee would be clarified butter with the milk solids, macadamia oil, and olive oil. That would be the best fats to choose from there. Okay? Coconut oil would probably be a huge powerhouse as far as training the body how to use fat for fuel. We reiterate at the bottom there about avoiding grains and grain-like seeds. Yes, Lee.
On oil, what does virgin or extra virgin actually?
Virgin means first press, like the first pressing, right? So they do multiple presses with the olives or whatever it is. And so those multiple presses can't be called virgin. The virgin is the first one. Yeah.
For sweets.
Yeah, first squeeze, that's it. All right, and then if you're flexible, we already mentioned, so we're on page 9 now. Eating eggs and dairy is going to be a huge, huge win. If you have the ethical, animal-based concerns, so a lot of plant-based advocates are going to be okay with things like oysters that don't have a nervous system. Theoretically, knows what they're feeling, but and then insects and worms would be great. It's almost an infinite supply of insects and worms. Protein powders, we've already talked about the main ones that we recommend. We definitely recommend a B12. And then making sure that you have the right version of that. And I know which one it is, and I think I had it listed previously. I think creatine would be something really beneficial. I think every human being on the planet would benefit from supplementing with creatine because it's not just a performance enhancement supplement. The brain uses it, the digestive system uses it, all of our muscles contain it. And if you're not eating animal meats, you're definitely not getting a lot of dietary creatine. So I think everyone would benefit from it. All right, the most studied version has been creatine monohydrate, but then I use a creatine HCl, which is a more acidic version because monohydrate just goes right through. Within 30 minutes. It's crazy. All right, and then on the last page there, we already talked about algal oil. So I'm not sure as far as what a good quality brand is, but if you find something that looks like it's got some good reviews, then that would be awesome. And then pescatarianism is going to be consuming fish and shellfish and seafood versus the lacto-evo, and that is like dairy and eggs. Okay, I feel like in the literature, there's a little bit more benefits that come from being pescatarian versus the lacto-evo, but either one's going to be better than just being 100% plant-based. All right, now if you want me to help you put together like a little supplement protocol, I love tinkering with this stuff, and I'm always evolving with it. So I have some really good thoughts around how to combine these different things that we want to get, and I actually listed the different nutrients down at the bottom that we talked about. Those would be the things that we want to make sure that we consider. For those of you that are omnivores, like I'm doing some awesome organ therapy. I just finished a book, actually it's called Organ Therapy. It was written in the 1950s or something, and oh my God, it's been a game changer. So that is everything that I have in our handouts. If you have any other questions or comments? Or feedback. Because I talked to Chandler about this a couple of years ago, I think, right? Yeah. And then any feedback, anything that we can learn from.
Getting rid of grains was the biggest game changer for me. It really was.
Chandler says getting rid of grains was the biggest game changer for him. Like breads and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just eliminating it completely just made a huge difference.
Yeah.
How? With energy?
Energy, I mean, just your body composition, like it makes such a huge difference in body composition. That was just feeling off. It's crazy. So.
Yeah, I remember that. In your first few weeks, I noticed it. But grains, like the human digestive system, just doesn't. Most people don't do really well. There's some really good books out there like Wheat Belly, Grain Belly, where they talk about the anti-nutrients containing them.
And that includes oats too. I used to be big on oatmeal until I realized I can't digest it. It's just interfering with my digestion.
And then it's useful to ask the question, like, why am I eating these things?
Right.
And that's why I like to come back to, well, we want nutrients, minimal toxins, metabolic efficiency. Grains are not very nutrient heavy. They have a lot of natural toxins, which we experience from digestive issues and skin issues. I mean, if I have a beer now, immediately I can feel my foot start to itch right away. And then the metabolic deficiency is mainly carbohydrate. Probably not the best choice. What else? What other questions or comments we got? Diane.
If you're not a vegetarian, are you better to eat seafood protein or meat protein?
Say that again now.
If you're not a vegetarian and you're eating your protein, is it more nutrient rich to be seafood or beef? Both?
Okay, so if you're omnivore, seafood versus beef, I think experimenting with just getting a balance of everything, trying to get a little bit of everything for a broad nutrient spectrum. Because there's going to be nutrients that we get from shellfish and seafood that we're not going to find in red meat, and then vice versa. So I think just experimenting with trying to incorporate all of it.
So where do you buy oysters? In my life, I've never had an oyster.
Oh, yeah. I mean, usually the way I consume it is like either at a restaurant where they have just fresh oysters, or I like Crown Prince's little canned oysters that they have in olive oil. I think they taste amazing. But I see them at Whole Foods sometimes. Yeah, behind the meat counter. Yeah.
Boil, I think you steam them. You steam them and they naturally open.
Yeah, if you steam them, they'll open on their own.
They
Yeah.
open on their own.
Natural, like
Mhm.
shucking them raw.
They're very
Yeah.
similar to cleanse.
Yeah.
It's not hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
I
they-
usually
they're
I like them raw at restaurants, and then you can get them there raw, or you can get like a little bit cooked in some canned ones or something.
Fly to New Orleans, right?
Yeah.
All you want.
Oh my God.
Sounds
I have
good.
one more question.
Yeah.
I had some friends over. They're all between 70 and 80. And what's happening is, mainly with the men, and I had king crab and, sweet potato salad. By the time they finish eating, they have to
I know, right?
button their button because their bellies puff right up. I mean, it's hard.
Okay, say that again now. Like, oh,
When they eat, the men have to unbutton their bottom button because the belly is puffing up. And you started this whole thing saying how the gut was so important. And so I guess what I'm wondering is how could it blow up with king crab and butter and fats? I didn't have bread though. I had some baguettes. Would it be the baguettes that blow up?
you talking about in the moment, like immediately?
Well, within the half hour.
Yeah, I would say if they're eating breads and stuff, that's what's going to contribute to the feel. Like when I used to eat that stuff, like that would definitely make me feel super bloated.
Right, and it's not
Pizza is
it's
the worst.
feeling it, it's looking.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, but again, personally now, I can eat a meal of a massive amount of like meat and stuff, and I don't feel that. So I feel like intuitively that's more something where the body's kind of reacting to it in a way that's it's just not something that's good for you. So there's something in that. And then maybe it's a combination of things that they're doing outside of that one meal. So they already have a sensitive, inflamed digestive system. And then maybe this one meal, they're eating good, but still just digestion in general. Like most of us go through a transitional phase of like our digestion is like completely off. You eat 100% real food, it gets better immediately, but you still have like, bloating and things like that. It's just less and less and less.
So if I gave them something that's like a probiotic, like that sauerkraut or something, I don't know, would that stop that from happening?
I don't
while they're
think
in
so.
my house?
I think the first step, honestly, because like I used to try to believe in probiotics, and I'm not saying there's not a beneficial role, but there's so many different kinds. And I
like
think-
sauerkraut kind of thing.
Yeah, because that's real food based. So what I was going to say is the first step would be to get this person or this group of people to eat real food.
All the
That would be
time.
the best thing for the gut.
Because I thought I was feeding food.
Yeah.
On my way to.
The day before,
You
the day
were,
before,
but
the day
yeah.
before.
Exactly.
I would say building up to
Yeah,
that.
that's not good.
That's what I'm
They
saying.
don't cook, they order stuff out a lot.
Yeah, now
Feed them every meal. every day.
exactly. If you had them live with you and then you cooked for an entire week and you controlled everything they ate, then that bloating and stuff would probably completely resolve. But you can't control what's happening outside of that one meal. So
Okay. And then I have one question, probably not related, but because Ruth Ginsburg died.
hold that question because I want to come back to though. I'm a huge believer in digestive support. So one thing that you can help do to help in the immediate moment is to take some digestive enzymes, some hydrochloric acid, some concentrated beet juice, because that will help you digest in the moment better. So that could be, I was trying to think, you're saying, what can I do in the moment?
Beet?
Yeah, well, there's several companies, like I sell a really good product. It's like concentrated beet juice and so beet juice is going to help. The things you want to support are the stomach acidity to help break down proteins, the bile flow to help break down fats and digest fats, and then enzymes to help assimilate those different nutrients. So there's some supplements that you could that would be really cool actually if you had a dinner in these little Dixie cups of supplements and say, hey, here, take this with your meal. So some supplements might be beneficial to help in the moment. So yeah, go ahead. What was the
What
second?
happens if you don't have a gallbladder? Doesn't that do fat thing?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So if you don't have a gallbladder, we recommend taking a supplement that mimics the action of the gallbladder. So usually what happens is when you eat fat, your gallbladder gets kind of stimulated and it signals to squeeze and squirt bile into the small intestine to help you digest the fat, right? So think about bile as like it helps to disperse it and make it more accessible, okay? Now, if I don't have the gallbladder, then I don't have the action to squirt bile, but I'm still making bile. But the bile doesn't have anything to tell it to squirt into the small intestine. So what we recommend is taking some bile with your food so that you can help yourself digest fats. So there's a couple, again, I have a really good supplement. Say again?
So the gallbladder doesn't make the bile. It's just.
It's made right there with the liver and the gallbladder, right? Yeah, you still make bile when the gallbladder's removed. Yep.
Okay. My last question.
What makes it? I don't know. I need to look at that. Anatomy and physiology.
Ginsburg and pancreatic cancer. A lot of people that I know they die. It's usually that kind of cancer. And the pancreas creates insulin.
I mean, it's one of the things that it does,
So
but also a lot of the enzymes and
what
stuff.
kinds of food here are good to make the pancreas healthy?
I would say real food again, right? Because you want.
Particular.
Yeah, well, think about it like this. You want optimal functioning of organs for the purpose that they're there for. All right, so like the gallbladder, the worst thing that you can do for the gallbladder is not eat fat, because the gallbladder is there to help you digest fat. It's like if I put a cast on my arm for 6, 8, 12 weeks because I have a broken arm, what happens when I take it off? Everything is atrophied, right? It's very thin and brittle and weak. So we want the body to be used for what it's. Why do we exercise? Because we're trying to make our muscles stronger, you know. So it's like we want those organs used, but used properly. So if I don't eat fat, I'm not using my gallbladder. If I eat too many carbohydrates, especially the wrong kind of carbohydrates, I'm overusing the pancreas. If I'm overeating too often, I'm overusing the pancreas in the way it wasn't designed. I'm overworking it, you know?
Makes sense.
So in my mind, it's like going back to just how is it meant to be used? How are we meant to be and how are we meant to live? So the best thing for the pancreas is the same recommendation we'd make for anything else, and that is basically eat 100% real food, focus on maximum nutrients, minimal toxins, and training the body how to use fat for fuel.
Makes sense, because I had a friend who gave up butter, all fats for 2 years. Why, I don't know. She's the one that had the gallbladder.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Somebody must have told her that fat makes you fat or whatever.
Well, I mean, we all have heard that. So.
Yeah, we've all heard that.
Yeah.
Sure.
What else?
Screwed up.
Cool. I think that's about all I got.
Cool.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Paul. This is
I hope it was useful. Let's see if we got any questions here from actually we just got a couple of people that were. You got anything in here? Where are we at? The bike is made in the liver, stored in the gallbladder. Okay, great. Bile is made. This is one of my nutritional cohorts. She actually is an NTP too. Bile is made in the liver and stored in the gallbladder. Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Nicole. All right. So we are out of here. Thank y'all so much for being here.